Hey everyone, welcome to a review of the Black Ops 4 Zombies map Voyage of Despair. I've seen a lot of criticism and hatred toward this map, calling it the worst BO4 map and one of Treyarch's worst Zombies maps ever made. My opinion on the map, however, is quite the contrary. This is my favorite map in Black Ops 4. I was so unbelievably excited to play it when it was first shown at the BO4 reveal event back in May 2018. I love the setting and the atmosphere, I was intrigued by the new characters and the new story, and I was ready for a new Treyarch Zombies experience after IW and World War II had their own takes on the fan-favorite survival mode. While I absolutely adored IW and had good times with World War II, I was ready for a true sequel to the smashing success that was Black Ops 3. But I don't want to discuss the history or the rocky road of BO4. I want to take an in-depth look at Voyage of Despair, picking apart the wonder weapons, the main quest Easter egg, the boss fight, the gameplay, and generally all the components that form this titanic Zombies map, and why I continue coming back to it even 2 years after release. If you didn't already know or couldn't figure it out from my amazing pun, Voyage of Despair takes place on the RMS Titanic during its maiden voyage back in 1912. The game begins with the ship colliding with the iceberg as you spawn into the forecastle area. The music feels mighty and alarming at the same time. As you progress through the map, you can hear the ship creaking as it navigates through the cold waters of the ocean, and see the wind and snow blowing through the air. I also love the round change music on this map, all around solid stuff. I honestly love how this map looks and the color palette of the ship's exterior. The outside of the ship feels so cold and desolate. You look out to the water and there's nothing of significance in sight, just the cold Atlantic Ocean. You see icebergs floating off in the distance, but that's it. The sky is overcast, but with just enough space for the moon to peer through the clouds. Plus, the exterior design of the ship really connects with me due to my favorite color being metallic blue, and grey blues in general. Moving into the interior of the ship, the color palette certainly brightens up in many areas, including the dining and engine rooms, where the warm colors make the ship feel alive and lived in, but at the same time conveys a theme of a desolate world devoid of any joy or soul. The maiden voyage of the Titanic was meant to be a grand celebration, but it ended in disaster. Next up is the map flow. As mentioned before, the game starts on one end of the ship on the forecastle. From here you have the choice between two pathways. The bottom path takes you through the staterooms, up the grand staircase, through the dining hall, along the side of the ship and to the poop deck. The top path travels through the ship's bridge, first class lounge, along the side of the ship and to the poop deck. Along each of these paths yield both one shield and distillation kit part, as well as the Zeus and Ra perk statues. Many Zombies maps share this parallel structure in the early game progression, and it flows really nicely on Voyage in particular. When you do eventually reach the poop deck, the Sentinel artifact will be waiting there for you, acting as the power switch in the Chaos storyline maps. What happens next is entirely up to you. New areas such as the engine room and cargo hold open up, allowing access to the final shield and distillation kit parts, more wall weapons, and the Odin perk machine. These new areas are initially flooded with water and require you to swim through them to find the special valve to drain the water. After draining the area, it'll function as a regular play space for the remainder of the game. Pack-a-Munch is now available to unlock, requiring 4 pedestals to be activated around the map. These are located on the poop deck, in the turbine room, which is connected to the engine room, in the cargo hold, and at the bottom of the grand staircase. A short and simple process that naturally flows with the exploration of the map. Nice. At about round 10, the first Stokers will begin spawning into the map, upping the ante of the mid-round gameplay. Around this point into the game, you'll probably want to start working on getting the Kraken, which will be discussed in depth in the next section, so I'll leave that for now. Into the mid-teens, you'll have the first Blightfaller spawn in, which can be dispatched with relative ease by a Pack-a-Munch weapon. The 2 crafting tables are found at the base of the poop deck and at the top of the engine room. I think the placements of these tables are pretty genius, as each one is designated for a specific buildable. The shield is built at the base of the poop deck, which fits perfectly with the way I play this map. I tend to train on the poop deck itself, so having the shield in close proximity at all times is very nice. The gun on the shield isn't half bad either and can be useful for when you're running low on ammo. Too bad they reused the shield in 4 other maps. It also has an upgrade that provides higher shield durability, and the shield's gun now has the crowd freeze double pack ability. Neat.
Also Voyage Sam, can't forget that last galleon.
The Kraken's distillery kit is built in the engine room, which is a risky area to travel to mid-round. If you're using the Kraken during a game, this creates a high-risk, high-reward situation for the player that I enjoy taking my chances with. I really enjoy the setup on this map, as it feels very open and allows you to pursue whichever avenue best suits your main priorities. Want the shield? Go grab it! Weapons feeling weak already? Slap those bad boys in the Pack-a-Munch machine. Feel like wielding a cannonball launcher? Go for the Kraken, and maybe its elemental variant if you're really feeling dangerous. Maybe do them all at the same time, which is possible because of how streamlined the progression feels in this map. None of it feels super tedious besides for maybe getting the free Kraken, but that has become a non-issue for me after playing this map so many times. Each process flows well into one another and makes the early game feel satisfying to play through. High rounds can be somewhat of a slog with a Kraken dropping off around the 40s, but I don't typically play for high rounds, so this doesn't greatly affect my opinions on the map or the wonder weapon. Speaking of flow, how does the map actually flow? Many people despise this part of Voyage, but once again I find myself in the minority and believe that Voyage actually has some really solid map flow. This can be mostly attributed to two main aspects: the fast travel portal locations and the number of different pathways available. Firstly, the fast travel system. Many of these portals are really well placed and help players out of dead ends. Nearly every main area has fast travel nearby, so it never feels tedious to reach any given portal. Some of the best locations include the turbine and engine rooms, in front of the cargo hold, and the poop deck / forecastle portal. While it's nice to have fast travel available to the player, it shouldn't be the solution to lackluster map flow. Looking at you, Ancient Evil. That's where my second point comes in, the path variety. One good example in particular is how there are so many ways to get from spawn to the poop deck. There's the left and right sides of the ship, the top of the ship, which has its own left and right side paths, and through the bottom of the ship. This means that there's always multiple different ways to get around hordes of zombies that may attempt to interfere with your map traveling. These multiple pathways also lead to many ways in and out of the ship, especially the pathway connecting the top of the ship to the kitchen and dining room where Raw is located. It's small shortcuts like these that, while initially confusing, add to a certain level of mastery that other BO4 maps are lacking. The wonder weapon of Voyage of Despair is the perfectly named Kraken, a triple-barreled cannon / launcher beast of a weapon that I honestly love. This is easily one of my favorite parts of this map. The way the Kraken reloads is so stylish. You can see and feel the impacts of its shots when you shoot it. It just feels so good to use. And upgrading is as simple as throwing a pack-a-punch machine, turning the Kraken into the with more ammo, more firepower, and a larger explosive radius. Did I mention that there's no splash damage associated with this weapon? Icing on the cake. There's two ways of obtaining the Kraken in this map. You can either try your luck with the mystery box, or complete a short quest involving getting a Stoker key, filling up 3 soul boxes, and meeting the Kraken himself. This idea of getting the map's main wonder weapon by either hitting the box or doing a quest is carried through each of BO4's maps, which is one of the greatest quality of life features this game added. And for most maps, every player in the game can get their own wonder weapon, which is a nice plus. However, it doesn't stop there. After collecting all of the distillation kit parts around the map, you can infuse different elements into the Kraken that drop out of each catalyst enemy. Thus, the Kraken has 4 elemental variants based on the 4 catalysts. If your Kraken remains unpack-a-punch, the infusion will only cost 3,000, but if it is pack-a-punch, then it will cost 6,000. The Decay Kraken, or Acid variant, is a strong all-around weapon. It's most effective when you hit an enemy with a direct impact shot, causing a large acidic explosion. When the map first came out, I avoided using this variant because I thought that it didn't kill very effectively compared to the other variants. But then I figured out I was using it wrong. If you shoot the Decay Kraken at the ground, you won't deal much damage, but direct impacting enemies is where it really shines. When pack-a-punched, it becomes the Jormungandr's Fang. The Plasma Kraken, or Fire variant, shoots out a Beyblade-looking fire vortex that travels in a straight line. Despite sounding powerful, I would actually consider this to be the weakest variant. It doesn't feel like it kills consistently, and sometimes just does nothing to zombies, as though there's some bug or something preventing it from functioning properly. It sometimes even feels like it's just knocking over zombies rather than dealing damage, which is super strange. When pack-a-punched, it becomes the Breath of Leviathan. The Radiant Kraken, or Electric variant, shoots out a shotgun-like spread that will clear anything in your path. I'd consider this to be the second best variant of the Kraken, as it can pull you out of nearly any corner and is very strong against Stokers. The main downside is that the Electric Kraken is awful at killing the Blightfather. During the mid-round 20s, it can take upwards of 3 to 4 full magazines of this variant to kill the thing, which is easily outclassed by all other Kraken variants and most box weapons. But in every other situation, it's an underrated powerhouse that I love using just as much as the Ice variant. When pack-a-punched, it becomes the Inkinyamba's Roar. Purified Kraken, or Ice variant, is considered to be the best version of the Kraken by most players, including myself. Shooting it will create a slowing ice tornado at the point of impact, as well as doing respectable damage to zombies, Stokers, and Blightfathers. This variant can get you out of almost any corner with smart usage, and is very beneficial to have in the boss fight especially. It has the lowest fire rate between all 4 variants, but still hits really hard. I think this is a fantastic weapon, and along with the Radiant Kraken, ranks as one of my favorite wonder weapons in not just BO4, but all of zombies. When pack-a-punched, it becomes the Grip Akaraka Mui. This is a small thing, but the addition of colored icons for each Kraken variant looks really neat on the HUD. This was added post-launch, but I'm not really sure when. Another extra detail I find super cool is the naming of the upgraded Krakens, and how each of them is based on a mythical sea creature from different mythologies and cultures around the world. The is a sea monster originating from Scottish Gaelic folklore. Jormungandr is the legendary sea serpent in Norse mythology. The Leviathan comes out of Jewish mythology and is mentioned in several Bible stories. Inkinyamba is a mythical serpent reigning from myth and legends from the Zulu tribes in South Africa. and Akarakamui's an octopus-like monster out of Japanese folklore. Extra details like these 5 names really contribute to the running themes of mythology in the Chaos storyline, and is a story I wish would continue in the future zombie iterations. Voyage of Despair features a couple special enemies to spice up the mid-round gameplay. First off are the 4 catalyst enemies: Fire, Ice, Electric, and Acid. The Fire Catalyst will slowly walk towards you, blowing up and dealing 125 damage if you get too close. The Ice Catalyst will buff other zombies in the area, giving them more health and allowing them to deal 75 damage to the player. The Electric Catalyst will shoot a shockwave at you, temporarily obscuring your vision and deafening your hearing. The Acid Catalyst walks around with a smoke cloud that causes only 5 damage to the player. This may seem underwhelming at first, but its main purpose isn't to kill you, but rather to halt your health regeneration to allow other enemies to down you. My main problem with the Catalyst zombies in Voyage is not necessarily their purpose in the gameplay, but rather their spawn rates, which range from average to downright unfair. If there was any Catalyst zombie that I actively disliked, it would be the Fire variant. This is for the sole reason that if one were to spawn directly in front of you and cut you off, there isn't much you can do to get him out of your way, and you're forced to soak up 125 damage. So if you manage to escape a tight situation with low health, there's a solid chance that can be completely ruined by poor Fire Catalyst spawns. Next up is the main heavy of the map, the Stoker. In my opinion, this is one of the most well-designed heavy enemies introduced into zombies. He has a melee attack where he swings his large shovel, dealing 100 damage to the player. He also has a range attack very reminiscent of the Russian Mangler's homing attack from Gorod Krobi and Firebase Z, but significantly nerfed to make it much more balanced. It's also still able to snipe players that have poor movement, so you gotta stay on your toes. He also has 3 sections of coal armor on his body that can be destroyed, making him more vulnerable to weapon damage. If a Stoker is left alive for too long, he can enter a rage mode that causes him to sprint towards the player at what feels like Mach 10 speed, so you better be listening out for those audio cues. Speaking of which, the sound effects for breaking up the coal armor and forgetting the final kill are so damn satisfying that I never get sick of fighting Stokers. I also just love the design of this guy, how his fiery body and black coal features contrasts with the map's colors, making him stand out amongst zombie hordes. And finally, we have the Blightfather. To be honest, I don't like this guy very much. Maybe I'm just bad, but I find his homing attack to have overpowered tracking abilities, and the fact that he'll unleash multiple of these homing attacks at a time adds to the pain felt from fighting this enemy. He can also grab you with his tongue, pulling you in similar to the Panzer from Origins, but the grip is fairly easy to break, so I really don't have any issues with it. My main issue with Blightfathers come not from their design or gameplay implications, but rather that they were used on 3 of the 4 Chaos maps, and I'll forever wonder why that would be considered fun. The next thing I want to discuss is the main Easter egg quest, Abandoned Ship. I'll briefly summarize the steps, discussing each one, then giving my overall thoughts at the end. The Voyage of Despair Easter egg begins with activating the Sentinel artifact and unlocking Pack-a-Punch. Next up is the clock symbol step, where you need to run around the map collecting information on the hand positions and triangle symbols for 4 different clocks, which correlate to cranks that must be adjusted according to that data. It's a bit tedious in solo, but with multiple players that know what they're doing, it's not at all an issue. Having to write down the clock times can be annoying if you don't have a notepad with you, or if you're also having to hold a zombie while writing things down. Thankfully, you can mitigate this by pausing the game in solo or having other players hold the zombie in co-op. The 4th step involves investigating 6 electrical outlets around the map and assigning 4 of them to the 4 catalyst enemy types. A specific catalyst zombie must be killed at their respective outlet, and only 1 outlet can be done per round. I really don't like this limitation, as it feels like it was added just to pad out the length of the quest. Furthermore, this can sometimes ruin specific matches if the order of the catalyst spawns don't happen in your favor due to bad luck. If you have 1 specific catalyst left to kill, in some games you can go consecutive rounds without that 1 enemy spawning, which pushes you into higher rounds to the fault of poor RNG out of the player's control. However, following the killing of all of the catalyst enemies, you must now complete 4 lockdowns for each of the 4 elements in a specific order. The first lockdown has players defending the poop deck from acid catalysts, zombies, and Blightfathers. The second lockdown occurs in the flooding cargo hold with water catalysts, zombies, and a Blightfather. Because this area is so tight, doing this lockdown without a Kraken is extremely difficult, and in my opinion it's the hardest one by far. The third lockdown happens on the boat deck with electric catalysts, zombies, and once again a Blightfather. The final lockdown takes place in the boiler room with fire catalysts, zombies, and stokers. After completing this final lockdown, the step will be complete. Step 5 is much simpler than the previous 2 steps. With the Decay Kraken, you have to shoot 8 steaming pipes, which will reflood the engine room with water. Once done that, you have to wait for the Pack-a-Punch machine to move back into the engine room, which, if it's not already there, will move to that location the following round, and then interact with the Pack-a-Punch machine to Pack-a-Punch the Sentinel artifact. A bit of a weird one, but it's easy, so I don't really have any complaints. The 6th step, known as the infamous Planet step, begins with interacting with 9 symbols around the map, which are always in the same location and are visible from the start of the game. Then, in the cargo hold, a model of the solar system will burst out of a crate, where you must once again enlist the usage of your trusty notepad to record information about the order of the blinking planets. Activating the model will spawn in one of my favorite skyboxes in any video game, with all the planets in the solar system placed into the sky semi-accurately scaled to the real-life distances. For some people, this may seem like a neat little thing for the Easter egg, but for myself, who studies astrophysics at university, this is an amazing sight to behold. You must shoot the planets based on the order that was shown from the model, and after shooting a specific planet, must run to a spot on the map where it will land to be picked up. Throughout this step, you'll have infinitely spawning zombies that don't give points, and be on a strict time limit to pick up each planet after it's been shot, with the time being even shorter in co-op games. But with enough persistence and knowledge of the universe, all of the planets will be collected, leading to the next step of the quest. The Ice Time Trial is the 7th step of the Voyage Easter egg, which has you hauling ass from spawn all the way to the poop deck, while destroying ice chunks that block your path. It's a hectic, fast-paced step with somewhat strict time limit, but I honestly love it. It can kind of suck if you don't have the right weapons for the job though. For example, if you don't have an explosive weapon like the upgraded Welling or the Helion Salvo or the Hades, you'll be very rushed for time just using the Kraken. However, specialists are by far the most effective way to destroy the ice, so strategically choosing when to pop your specialist is also important. Through my multiple completions of this quest, I've tried out the Scepter of Ra and the Vibrant Dragon, and both have been effective against the ice blocks. Once the final ice block is destroyed, it's time for the legendary Eye of Odin boss fight. I love everything about this boss fight. Almost. It's fast-paced, difficult, requires good strategy and knowledge of the map, and you cannot be caught messing around. After entering the iceberg, you swim over to what appears to be the World Tree from Norse mythology, also known as the Yggdrasil. The World Tree bridges the 9 realms of Norse mythology together, which is represented by the 9 planetary objects collected in the planet step. You place the sentinel artifact near the tree, some planets fly at you, and you're teleported to the poop deck, where you're greeted by the most absurdly massive iceberg slowly rising out of the water. I know from the iceberg appears a giant eyeball, or for you Norse mythology buffs, the Nidhogg, which is a large serpent-like creature who slowly eats away at the tree's roots. Why is it an eyeball on this map? I don't know. But what I do know, however, is that you better be ready for one hell of a boss fight. Once the map is covered in a blue haze and the invigorating music swells into the background, it's time for Phase 1. The boss fight starts off on the poop deck, first spawning zombies, and then catalysts, then stokers, then blightfathers. The first 2 phases follows the same pattern of enemy appearances, but with a new mechanic introduced in a different location. Simply kill all of the enemies as they spawn in, and you'll move on to the next section. Phase 2 transports you to the engine room and has the new mechanic with swirling ice tornadoes on the ground. These do not directly cause damage to the player, but will buff the zombies that walk through them, similar to the water catalyst enemy, causing them to deal 75 damage. Other than that, the fight still remains the same. Kill all the enemies as they spawn in. Phase 3, however, is where things change drastically. You're locked in the staterooms, an extremely tight area where it's virtually impossible to train. From this point on, the Eye of Odin will begin attacking the player by shooting a large ice beam out of its eye that will damage and slow the player, eventually freezing them with enough exposure. Coincidentally, the eye just happens to be vulnerable to weapon damage while it's shooting its beam. This is when the boss fight evolves into a game of patience and strategy even more so than before. In the first 2 phases, the fight has consisted of mowing down all enemies that threaten your life, but from this point forward, you'll need to be dealing damage to the eye to progress the fight, choosing when the best time to do that is. It's very easy to get distracted with dumping huge amounts of damage onto the boss and be left vulnerable to getting down by other enemies on the map. It's exciting, keeps you on your toes, and sets up the rest of the fight very nicely. If you have the Purified Kraken, the main strategy I use for this fight is to camp in an area with access to the 2 main hallways that the eye will shoot its beam down. You can use the Ice Kraken to slow down and kill enemies on the map, then use your secondary weapon to damage the boss. With any other Kraken variant, you'll have to do some sort of training strategy, which can be very hectic and is much harder than camping. If you got Homunculus from the box before starting the boss fight, now is an excellent time to throw a couple of those to allow for some optimal DPS. Sometimes this phase can be dealt with fairly quickly, but other attempts can make this brutal or even unfair to some degree depending on the enemies that spawn in. Stokers and fire catalysts in close quarters spawning next to you can be an absolute nightmare, and can be really frustrating when they delete half your health. Thankfully, Blightfathers will not spawn during this part, so that's at least something. Phase 4 teleports you into the Promenade starboard deck, where the fight follows the same process established in the previous phase. Wait for it to shoot its beam, dump huge damage, repeat. This area is a bit more open than the stateroom, so training is possible, although it's very tough due to how tight the area still is. Most of my deaths in this phase resulted from being distracted with damaging the boss and dying from zombies hitting my back, or what feels like through my shield, but I digress. There isn't much else new happening in this phase, so let's move on to the 5th and final part of this boss fight. Returning to the poop deck, the fight feels like more of the same procedure of shooting the eye while it's beaming in the area. However, there is one new mechanic that I'm very mixed about. After dealing enough damage, the boss will appear at the end of the ship and make a loud, piercing screech that's impossible to miss. This begins the white phase of the boss, where if not enough damage is done in a limited amount of time, all players in the game will down and the game ends. The only ways to counter this insta-death is by having a charged Dying Wish, having self-revives in solo, or by continuing the fight after outputting enough damage to the eye. The amount of damage you have to deal with this boss is so high that most weapons in the game cannot meet this health requirement, which severely limits your choices for your secondary weapon. This really kills the boss fight for me, because sometimes I like running mean weapons in the boss fight, or trying new strategies with my loadout, but if you're not using the high TPS weapon like the Hades or Hylian Shovel, you will not beat this boss fight. I've even brought in the Grav, a pretty solid AR, into the boss fight for one game, but just could not get through this white phase. At first I thought maybe the condition for progressing the fight through the white phase was just continuous damage, but no, you need to surpass a specific damage threshold or you're screwed. If you initiate the white phase with a Blightfather still alive, you might as well just end the game yourself. There is no feasible way that you can stand in place for over 10 seconds without getting hit by zombies, or stokers, or catalysts, or Blightfathers. It's not happening. This makes the homunculus another must-have item from the box for this Easter egg, because otherwise you might as well just quit the game and not waste your time. I really love this boss fight, don't get me wrong, but the execution of the white phase is just so frustrating that it hurts. It makes the final phase of the boss extremely dependent on box RNG, which is by far my least favorite thing in video games. It takes control away from the player and replaces skill with a slot machine. Despite loving this Easter egg, having the boss fight reliant on getting the best weapons from the box really kills my enjoyment in games where I just cannot get that one weapon or item I need. Of course you can just spam immolation liquidation elixirs if you have enough to use, but not all players do, including myself, so that's not exactly a viable strategy. Last little section I have here is just, I want to bring up some extra points about the map that didn't necessarily fit in any section. I really love the pack-a-punch camos on this map and the ice theming of each. These 5 camos include yellow, green, blue mixed in with red mixed in with blue, and my personal favorite in all of Black Ops 4, the purple ice camo. Oh my god, it looks so good! Roaming pack-a-punch is a thing on this map, and I gotta be honest, it's not great. It does at least tell you exactly where the pack-a-punch machine is at any given time, so that's cool. I know there's an Easter egg which allows you to have pack-a-punch active at all locations, but I'm pretty sure it's only active for 1 round, so that's utterly pointless. The swimming feels very underutilized in this map. You have to swim to turn on the 2 valves to drain the water, but after that it never shows up again. I really wish they did more with this mechanic, or made it appear in future Zombies maps, and almost made a whole map that was focused on swimming. That would be really cool. Up to this point, I haven't talked much about the Chaos story or the playable characters in the map. That's because I don't really have much to say other than that I like them. Every character has something different to say that hints at their backstory, and the Chaos storyline is super awesome, only getting better as the maps progress. I'd honestly prefer if Chaos continued rather than having Cold War's Dark Aether story. A lot of people complain about the missed potential with this map, and how the setting of the Titanic could have been used in a much more significant or dynamic way in the Easter egg. While I do agree with most of these arguments, I really can't say that it ruins my enjoyment of the map. Yes, some of those ideas would be really cool, but that's not the map we got, and Treyarch clearly had different plans for the map, or less time for the map, so I don't personally agree with calling the map trash partially because of missed opportunities. Thanks for watching my review of Voyage of Despair. Overall, this map is still a joy to play with an interesting layout covered in shortcuts, some beefy wonder weapons, a solid main quest, and an awesome boss fight that unfortunately contains one major design flaw. That being said, other features like roaming pack-a-punch, Blightfathers, catalyst spawn rates, and some underpowered crack advance can hurt the gameplay of the map. Feel free to leave your thoughts on the Voyage of Despair in the comments. I will read and respond to every single one. Hopefully I've convinced some of you to give this map another chance, though it's possible I just made you hate it more. Let's hope for the former. I'm not sure what the next Zombies map review will be, probably whatever I happen to be in the mood for. Maybe the next review won't even be zombies. That would be interesting. Once again, thank you for watching, and have a great day.